a foul on Rick Fox.
Oh,
Christie
hey.
put it back in Fox's face and pushes him back again. And we have pushing and shoving between the Kings and Lakers here early. Oh, there's a fight going on between the two as they were being ejected.
Believe it or not, these scenes are 2 minutes into a preseason game between the Lakers and the Kings. And this fight between Rick Fox and Doug Christie wasn't just a preseason scuffle. This was years of animosity, years of tension between these two teams which just boiled over. The Lakers and the Kings had faced off for 3 consecutive seasons in the playoffs. So the question is, what happened in those 3 playoff meetings? What happened that caused such resentment, such hostility to exist between these two teams? Well, the answer to that is a little bit of everything. From the heated moments on court to some of the most iconic clutch moments in NBA history, to a suspicious case of food poisoning and one of the most controversially called NBA games of all time, along with a lot of memorable sound bites from Shaq.
We're not worried about the Sacramento Queens.
And on top of all that, these two teams gave us some of the prettiest and most entertaining basketball ever played. So, to start things off, let's look at the Lakers and one of the greatest 1-2 punches in NBA history. The story for Shaq and Kobe began in 1996, when the Lakers traded away their starting center Vlade Divac to the Charlotte Hornets in exchange for the 13th pick in the NBA draft. And that 13th pick would be none other than Kobe Bryant. Kobe became the first ever guard to be drafted straight out of high school. And the Vlade trade also helped the Lakers clear up enough space on the salary cap to sign the most dominant big man in the NBA. Shaq had entered the NBA as almost a finished product, and by the time he joined the Lakers, he was one of the biggest stars in the league. Shaq was an absolute force of nature. From his early days in Orlando to his championship run in LA, Shaq made sure his presence was felt in every dunk, in every block shot, and in every bumping, bruising move he would make to establish his position inside. But Shaq wasn't just about overpowering his opponents. Shaq had a lot of skill and finesse to his game as well. He had exceptional footwork, he had a soft touch around the basket, and he had the ability to make swift and agile moves in the post. And on top of all that, he had exceptional ball handling skills for a big man from that era. And if you want to talk about Shaq in his prime, well, let me just tell you this. Prime Shaq was nearly impossible to guard. And had he worked on his conditioning and his free throw shooting, there might have been one more name on that never-ending GOAT debate. Shaq was also a character that was larger than life. And not just in a literal sense, but also in terms of his personality. Shaq was never bashful in his celebrations, and he often spent his summers partying, relaxing, or making some terrible movies. Shaq was never really focused on his conditioning, and this would be one of the major factors why he and Kobe would never see eye to eye as teammates. While Shaq entered the league as a finished product, Kobe came in as a teenager, whose confidence was probably bigger than his game at the time. But Kobe's confidence didn't come from a place of arrogance or entitlement. Kobe had a work ethic and a drive and determination that's been unmatched in the NBA. Kobe's entire career was a tireless and continuous journey towards self-improvement. For all of his 20 years with the Lakers, he remained a student of the game from the beginning to the end. But perhaps his biggest strength was that killer instinct, that Mamba mentality that wouldn't let him flinch in any situation. Kobe had an ability to routinely make the spectacular look ordinary, and his play, especially in his younger days, was absolutely electrifying. Kobe's play in isolation situations was second to none. I'm not sure if there's ever been a player in the history of this game that's been more unguardable in a one-on-one situation than Kobe. He almost seemed to have a limitless range of moves. He could finish with either hand, he had flawless footwork, and his balance was impeccable. But Kobe wasn't just a scorer. His game was so well-rounded, he could create for his teammates at will, and he was also an exceptional defender. On top of all that, Kobe was also one of the greatest clutch players to ever play in the NBA. Recovering from those early air balls in Utah, Kobe would go on and carry the Lakers through countless clutch situations, cementing his legacy as one of the great pressure performers in the history of the game. And while many thought that Kobe was a selfish and arrogant player in his younger days, one of my favorite parts about Kobe's evolution as a player was how he grew to be a leader who understood that he had to improve his teammates in order to win. And while Kobe may have entered the league being touted as the next Jordan, he left the league as the only Mamba, as the one and only Kobe Bryant. Now, I'm not going to dive too deep into the Shaq and Kobe feud, because that could take up an entire video on its own, but at its core, this feud boiled down to a clash of personalities and a battle for leadership. While Shaq had an easygoing, fun-loving personality, Kobe was obsessive in both his work ethic and in his constant pursuit for self-improvement. Shaq's laid-back attitude was often perceived by Kobe as a lack of commitment. Now, the other aspect was the leadership aspect. Shaq was clearly the better player of the two in the early days, but as Kobe continued to improve, he demanded more of the ball and he had a greater role in the team, which led to both men constantly competing for leadership in the team. And on top of that, Kobe's isolation one-on-one style of play was perceived by Shaq as selfishness. In the early days of this partnership, the Lakers weren't truly considered contenders. They would win just one game before being knocked out by the Jazz in the conference semis in '97, then in both '98 and '99 they were swept out of the playoffs. But all that would change in the summer of '99 with the arrival of the Zen Master himself, and his arrival would instantly improve the Lakers, as they would win 67 games in his first season there. Not only would he bring the best out of both Kobe and Shaq, but his use of the triangle offense would also ensure key contributions from supporting players such as Rick Fox, Derek Fisher, and of course, Big Shot Bob himself. So while the Lakers built everything around Kobe and Shaq, for the Kings, it was all about team basketball. The undisputed leader for the Sacramento Kings in the early 2000s was Chris Webber. Even before entering the league in 1993, Webber was a college star who led the famed Fab Five, and he was one of the most exciting and versatile power forwards in the game at the time. C-Web probably doesn't get enough credit for revolutionizing the power forward position. He had the athleticism and speed, but he also had the power game. Webber could also run the floor effectively and had an unbelievable passing range for a big man in that era. He was also extremely effective in the post and had excellent range on his jump shot. You could probably say that Webber was one of the first players to combine the traditional aspects of the power forward position with the modern game. And it's worth mentioning that Webber played in an era where Tim Duncan, KG, and Dirk Nowitzki were in the same conference. And it's not a stretch to say that if Webber didn't suffer knee injuries, well then his name would have been mentioned right up there among the elite power forwards of the game. The second scoring option for the Kings was usually Peja Stojakovic. Peja was a dead-eye sharpshooter who could probably hold his own in any era of basketball. In his time with the Kings, he was a three-time All-Star, and I'm guessing Peja is one of those players that would have loved to play in today's NBA. Another key player for the Kings was Vlade Divac. Vlade was one of the first European players to make a mark in the NBA. And Vlade's style of play would fit perfectly with the Kings because he was an outstanding passer with great vision and awareness. And he also had excellent range on his jump shot, which caused a lot of matchup problems for opposing teams, whose centers weren't comfortable to step out and defend on the perimeter. In their progression in the early 2000s, the point guard position may have been one of the most important ones for the Sacramento Kings, because although Jason Williams' flashiness was perfect for Sacramento's style of play, it was the arrival of Mike Bibby that gave them both consistency and stability in that position. Bibby was an outstanding clutch player, and he was one of the key figures in their rivalry with the Lakers. Other key players for the Kings were Doug Christie, who was an outstanding defender and at times a capable scorer as well. The Kings also had a solid bench with key contributors like Bobby Jackson and Hedo Turkoglu. But perhaps the most important figure for the Kings at the time was Coach Rick Adelman, who had the Kings playing an up-tempo and entertaining brand of basketball, which was popularly referred to as the greatest show on court, and it's not hard to see why. The Kings had a selfless, beautiful brand of basketball which involved a lot of crisp passing and movement. The skill level on display by the Kings at times was just simply breathtaking. And I know Anthony Edwards was probably born right around that time, but if there's any team that could help change his mind about the skill level in previous eras of basketball, well, the Kings from the early 2000s were as good a team as any. The first meeting between these two teams would happen in the year 2000. The Lakers had dominated teams throughout the season and had the best record in the league with 67 wins. And there was a feeling around the league that the Lakers weren't just about to win their first championship, they were about to start a dynasty. Meanwhile, for the Kings, they were an up-and-coming team at the time and were considered heavy underdogs for their matchup with the Lakers. Game 1 would begin with the Lakers doing what they did all year long that season: give the ball to Shaq and let him dominate inside. Both teams would keep it close early on. And the Kings would show why they were such an exciting team, led by Chris Webber, who had 28 points, and Jason Williams, who would chip in with 20 points as well. The Kings would show early on why their brand of basketball was so exciting to watch, with athletic plays like this from C-Web, and their patented quick passing and movement to break down the Lakers' defense. But late in the first quarter, the Lakers would start to pull away. Led once again, of course, by their superstar duo, Kobe and Shaq. And this layup from Kobe would put the Lakers up by 10 heading into the second half. The Kings would try to make a push early in the third quarter, but the Lakers would do enough to keep the Kings at bay. Shaq would continue to dominate the Kings throughout this game, as he finished with 46 points, 17 rebounds, and 5 blocks to lead the Lakers. Chris Webber would foul out midway through the fourth quarter, and that would mean the Kings would not be able to make another push in this game. Kobe would finish the game with 23 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists to step in and support Shaq, as the Lakers would close out Game 1 with ease. While Game 1 belonged to Shaq, Game 2 was all about Kobe. Kobe would dominate the game, scoring 32 points on the night, but it felt like every single basket that Kobe scored deserves a place on the highlight reel. It was one unbelievable move after the other. Kobe Bryant was bringing the Staples Center crowd to its feet with every single basket that he scored. And how about Shaq running the floor here and throwing up a perfect lob for Kobe? This three from Kobe will put the Lakers up by 13. And yeah, you're seeing that right. Everything I've shown you so far is just from the first quarter alone. And this would continue throughout the game. The Lakers would blow out the Kings in Game 2, as the Kings would just not have an answer for Kobe on this night.
Trying his way, had a good shot. Here comes Shaq. Back to Kobe, takes the pass. Drives inside! Mesmerizing play once again by Kobe Bryant.
As the series shifted to Sacramento, the Lakers held a commanding 2-0 lead. But ARCO Arena was no ordinary place to play basketball. And the fans in the Cowbell Kingdom would do their best to throw the Lakers off their game, ringing their cowbells for the entirety of the 48 minutes, creating an atmosphere unlike any other in the league. But in spite of the crowd, it was the Lakers who got off to a hot start early, with Kobe once again providing plenty of highlights.
Shot clock winding down. They got to get it up.
It'll be Bryant. Oh, that just takes your heart out if you're Sacramento.
And there were also moments where Jason Williams would show why his flashy style of play wasn't exactly ideal for playoff basketball. But C-Webb would try to keep the Kings in the game early. And Webber would put up some outstanding all-around numbers on the night with 29 points, 14 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals as well. And as always, when Webber would finish at the basket, he would do it emphatically. One positive for the Kings was that they managed to keep Shaq in check. And even though Shaq would have 17 rebounds, he would be kept quiet offensively, with just 21 points in the game, with 5 of 14 shooting from the free throw line. The Kings used a combination of double teams and hack-a-Shaq to limit Shaq's effectiveness. The Lakers held a 7-point advantage early in the second quarter, but that's when the Kings would start to make a push, with C-Webb continuing to lead the charge, not just with his scoring, but also by creating and facilitating for his teammates. Peja would have 19 points in this game, would be a massive factor off the bench, and this 3 would cap off a 13-3 run for the Kings, as the Kings would end the first half on a high. But as the second half began, it was the Lakers once again who came out with a much higher intensity level, and this layup by Kobe would put the Lakers up by 10. But as was the case throughout this game, every time the Lakers would make a run, the Kings would hit back with a run of their own. And if the first half showed us why Jason Williams' style of play could be so frustrating, well, the second half showed why it could be so exciting as well. And this tough jump shot by Peja, followed by this little move by Jason Williams, would cut the Lakers' lead back down to 2. And let me just emphasize this again. Those Kings played some beautiful basketball. And they would continue to push the Lakers. And this 3 by Peja would put them up by 1.
They have the lead.
The seesaw battle would continue though, and it was Kobe's turn to take control of the game. With Shaq struggling, Kobe took control of the offense and carried the Lakers in the fourth quarter, scoring 16 of the Lakers' 20 points in the quarter. With that basket, Kobe put the Lakers up by 5 with just 8 minutes to go. But in a game where both teams took turns going on runs, the Kings would now blow this game wide open.
Divac on the move, lays it off to Webber.
With the 14-0 run, the Kings would put this game on ice and will put the Lakers away in Game 3, keeping the series alive and taking all the momentum into Game 4. In Game 4, for the second straight game, the Kings would be facing elimination. But in this game, they would come out and shock everybody, dominating the Lakers from start to finish, led by Chris Webber, who had an outstanding all-around game, scoring 23 points, grabbing 13 rebounds, dishing out 8 assists, and helping out on the defensive side as well with 4 steals and 7 blocked shots in the game. Kobe would once again lead the Lakers with 32 points, providing good and plenty for the highlight reel on this night as well.
Oh, Kobe Bryant cleared for takeoff.
But Kobe's efforts would not mean much, as the Kings would use the balanced effort with 6 players in double figures. And again, key contributions from their bench from players like Tony Delk, Peja Stojakovic again, and John Barry as well. And as the top-seeded, heavily favored Lakers started to realize that there was a series on their hands, things began to get feisty between these two teams. The Kings would level the series, taking Game 4 with ease and forcing a Game 5 against the top-seeded Lakers. And they did it in style, playing their own brand of basketball.
Poked away by Webber. 3-on-2 behind the back to Yakovich. Back into Webber.
As the series returned to the Staples Center, Game 5 would prove to be anticlimactic. In the series decider, Shaq would show why he was the league MVP, and he would step up when the Lakers needed him the most, coming in with a monster performance with 32 points, 18 rebounds, and 3 blocked shots. Shaq bounced back from his subpar performances in Games 3 and 4 to help the Lakers clinch the series. Meanwhile, the Kings, who relied so heavily on a balanced approach and a team effort, would have just one player, Chris Webber, in double figures, as the Lakers would close out the series with a blowout win in Game 5. Kobe and Shaq would deliver on the expectations from them that season, as they would go on to win the championship, beating Indiana in the finals in 6 games. The first round meeting between the Kings and the Lakers, though, would go a long way in terms of lighting the fire between these two teams, and especially their fans. And the fire starter in this case was none other than Phil Jackson. After Games 3 and 4 in Sacramento, Jackson would refer to the Kings fans as semi-civilized and maybe redneck in some form or fashion. On top of that, in order to motivate his players for Game 5, Jackson would use the bizarre method of comparing Kings coach Rick Adelman to Adolf Hitler. And I'm not sure what would have caused this, but maybe Phil Jackson just had one too many cowbells ringing in his head. The 2001 campaign would start poorly for the Lakers, as Kobe and Shaq weren't exactly on the same page to start the year. Shaq had shown up to training camp out of shape and not ready for the season. And this had irked Kobe Bryant because he had spent the entire summer working on his game. On top of that, Shaq was annoyed that Kobe now had a bigger role on the team and was demanding more of the ball. But once Shaq got in shape, the Lakers would start to roll, and their two feuding superstars would put their differences aside as the Lakers would win their last 8 games to close out the regular season as the 2nd seed in the West. Meanwhile, for the Kings, they were a much improved team this year. With the key additions of Doug Christie, Bobby Jackson, and Hedo Turkoglu, the Kings would finish as the 3rd seed in the West, and they felt that it was their time to beat the Lakers. Having just won their first playoff series in 20 years, the Kings were feeling pretty good heading into the conference semifinals against the Lakers. But they would soon find out that they were coming up against both Shaq and Kobe at their absolute best. The Lakers' 1-2 punch was in full effect, and the Kings had absolutely no answers for them. Kobe would have 29 points and 5 assists in this game. C-Webb would try to keep the Kings in the game with 34 points, but it would be to no avail, as Kobe and Shaq would explode for 27 points in the 3rd quarter. The Lakers would take control of the game, and they would not look back. Shaq would finish the night with a monstrous performance, 44 points, 20 rebounds, 7 block shots, and 4 assists as the Lakers would take Game 1. Now, the Kings would have qualms about how this game was officiated, and it's not hard to see why. Take a look at these 2 possessions, for example. On this play, there's no call on Shaq, even though there's clear contact when he impedes Vladdy's shot. But just moments later, the same thing happens to Shaq. In fact, you could argue that Vladdy probably had less contact on Shaq, and he gets called for a foul. Now, I'm not saying that this would have changed the outcome of the game, but you will soon find out why the officiating in this rivalry is something that's talked about to this day. Now, unfortunately for Sacramento, the 2001 series would not be close at all, as Shaq and Kobe would both take turns dominating the Kings. Shaq would turn in another monstrous performance with 43 points, 20 rebounds, and 3 block shots to dominate Game 2 from start to finish. And as the series shifted to Sacramento, it was now Kobe's turn to dominate. Kobe would lead the Lakers in Game 3 with 36 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals, as the Lakers would blow the Kings out on their own home floor. And in Game 4, Kobe would do even better, turning in an unreal performance with 16 rebounds and 48 points. All this while providing his usual dose of highlights. Shaq and Kobe were absolutely phenomenal throughout this series, as the Lakers would sweep away the Kings and move on to the Western Conference Finals. The Lakers would go on an unbelievable run that postseason, going 15-1 on their way to their second consecutive championship.
I told you I was going to get another one.
Coming up in part 2 of this episode, we're going to look back at the 2002 Conference Finals, one of the greatest and most controversial NBA playoff series of all time.